Hello, everybody. I'm no. Hello, everybody. Hello, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Let's play chess. This is the last game yesterday, and we're gonna play a game of 5 minutes, 10 minutes per side per game. Alright. I'm not going to offer a rematch, but if he, she, or they offer, I'll accept a rematch. As long as it's within a respectable time frame. I'm just going to wait a few seconds here. Okay, so let's review this game. Turn on the HVAC unit. Ventilation and air conditioning. All right. So I had the white pieces. This was a strong game for white. We could look at this and say, well, 2 blunders in a 27 move game. A miss and a mistake. Maybe it wasn't as strong as I thought, but I felt like I was making some wise and great trades of intangibles. We play so often for material, but to be able to trade off, maybe forego the forego the chance to pick off a pawn by itself in favor of a more nebulous but still present kingside attack. Get your pawn up one more square, and maybe this kingside attack tells more of the story of the chess game and emerges triumphant, possibly maybe more than grabbing a pawn, a solo pawn. I don't know if I actually necessarily did exactly that on this game, but I'm trying to give the idea that sometimes in chess we must trade off intangibles. Realize that another one would be we're losing a knight for 2 pawns, but we're gaining initiative and king safety, perhaps. Both. It depends on what it is. And so we remember our 6 fundamental forces of chess, and I always want to credit Grandmaster Yasser Serouin with the first 5, and the 6th is my addition. I've also renamed what Serouin calls time, I now call initiative. So in this order, with just in the order that I memorized them: mobility, material, king safety, space, initiative, and then the one I added, clock. You can see why I may have taken time out of the parlance, because time is often initiative on the chessboard is often referred to as time. You have time to make that attack. But that sounds a lot like clock to me, and clock kind of sounds only like the clock, and initiative was a little bit more specific to the chessboard itself. So I call it in one initiative as for what happens on the chessboard, and clock. It's hard to confuse clock with anything. So I thought that was a little bit of a distinction that would help. So without further ado, we're gonna analyze this game. E4, E6, C4. The French opening is a great opening. I used to play with the pawn duo after D4, and often enough it's D5 and the advanced variation, the exchange variation. Fine, but I'd rather not get into a tug of war in terms of specific memorized lines. So I played C4. Takes the French out of the French defense. Et je vois dire que je suis désolé de ça, mais c'est l'échec. Et seulement pour l'échec que je fais ça. Oui? Ah bon, j'aime les Français. Alright, and so with pawn to C4, My opponent played this rather lousy move. Bishop to d6 was probably a mouse slip. It could have been a mouse slip, misclick, or mouse slip, or miss mouse or something. This bishop does not does not in a million years belong on c6. You could make an argument for b4, but then aren't we pushing the bishop back and trapping it anyway? So maybe not at b4. But c5 is better for that bishop. e7 is better for that bishop. The starting square is better for that bishop. So I grabbed some room in the center. I thought, well, we'll monitor this bishop situation on d6 with time. And here we see probably the intended move, bishop b4. Though it wouldn't have been check at last move, but this was probably the best move. Either that or on b4, c5, or e7 really would probably, if you're going to move that bishop, it would go to e7. Better off maybe moving a knight instead. And so, but as the board played, bishop b4 check, bishop d2, just a standard block. And I decided to capture with my queen, mostly because I'm looking at the shape of these pawns, and then with the queen on d2, she can continue to support d4, and I thought the knight really belongs on c3 for a variety of reasons, to combat expansion in the center. Yeah, my bishop on f1 supports or protects c4. So all these pawns, once knight c3, they're all protected. There's no reason to go to there's no reason to take time to capture on d2 with the knight, where he'll be adding support to the c4 and the e4 pawn. It blocks support of d4, and it's just not as active a move. So I captured with the queen. I'm glad to see that Torch 4 agrees that queen takes d2 is the strongest move out of those two. And neither one's, they're both pretty darn good. You got to reclaim the material without messing up your castle. But queen takes d2, I think, is just in a slightly good and nuanced way the better of the two moves. All right. So this is like, I could have gone right next to royalty on this last move with the knight. And now Black's saying, why didn't you go right next to royalty? Because the knight says, here I am next to royalty. And the question marks supplied by analysis says, why don't you move right next to royalty? Like, as a question, not just, this is me next to royalty, but why don't you move next to royalty? Anyway, that's just not really embedded in the chess itself. Yeah, knight to e7. You might think of knight to f6 as more natural, but then many players would want to avoid knight to f6 because of the follow-up e5, and this knight is starting to get a little bit tested early. There's a lot of pawns out here. White isn't in the lead in development, so knight to f6 might put that knight at risk on the chessboard. White can have some fun and good chances at picking up a piece simply by certain pawn moves with knight to f6. Oh, whoops, that wasn't knight to f6. This. I'll go to g5 and put the knight at risk, or e5 would gain white some tempos of initiative. Knight to f3, which is a good developing move. Kingside castles is right. And now here's an interesting move. h4. What do we feel about h4? This is clearly the beginning of a pawn storm. The pawn will have a strong amount of support along the way. And Black's knight on f6 is blocking what would be a point of pressure, but it doesn't really matter all that much, as the pawn has two pieces supporting him. Or are they? And yeah, this is the beginnings of a pawn storm. I'm saying, why not? You know, have my bishop on the starting square and my rook, bishop on the starting square, and my knight on the starting square. But why not? I don't have to complete development to be ahead of black on a board like this in terms of development, right? H4, not only that, but H4 develops the rook on H1. This rook is now developed by not moving. There are additional pawns like like the G2 pawn can move to G4 and be an aid. In some circumstances, E4, E5 helps out. The queen is developed. She's also in a position that is a bit menacing. Right now, she's free to play queen G5, and there's a pin on the G7 pawn. You know, this attack has to get rolling before it doesn't get rolling, not the other way around. So I pushed H4. I think it's a really good move. If I were my opponent, I'd probably play H5 and then hope for G6 and stymie the attack by way of a kingside pawn wall. I don't think that's going to do it, though. This is the H4 here announces white's intentions, and what's going to happen is going to happen. H5, just continuing things. My king is safe. There are all these kinds of pawns impeding black's mobility, and there's no dark squared bishop on the board to go to A5 with some kind of support where maybe my queen and king are getting skewered, but then the knight comes in. You know, it doesn't. There's no. You know, black is caught completely flat-footed, so I don't have to be all the way developed. Like I said, I don't have to be all the way developed to be by far the more developed side. So launch a pawn storm. F5. Pawn H6. Compare this to, everyone knows I like computer software and computer chess, but compare the kingside castles. All right, we're gonna go to the. We'll go to this. All right, kingside castles. Now, and here now, Torch considers pawn to H4. Formerly had it as a good move. I don't know. Your favorite rapper's like, yeah, he got it from me. And so I played H4. Here we are with the progress bar shows us ahead by like 8/10 of a pawn, but boom, 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 boom. Black hasn't made any serious, black hasn't made any serious mistakes. I guess D6, but we were at point 8. Now we have this virtual pawn ahead of that. This progress bar 1.6 means 16/10 of a pawn. It's 1.6 pawns. So that 0.8 is growing. Now there's, the machine is thinking through things, but this pawn storm is something that chess computers have difficulty grasping. They don't get that there's danger after H4 or H5. As humans, we see H4 and we say, oh shoot, if he's launching a pawn storm, that's because he, she, or they think it's you think it can be part of a dangerous attack. It has elements of it. So usually these things will catch your opponent unawares, and you'll think, I better stymie this somehow. The computer doesn't think like that. The computer thinks like boom, 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 and then count the pieces on the board and certain other count material on the board and maybe to some extent other intangibles. And if it's beyond that, boom, 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 then forget it. These pawn storms are getting pruned out of the way, and these pawn storms are sometimes not reached by even with good, strong computing and computing power, excellent software, and aggressive pruning. Their potential is not always reached. I'm not trying to be mean here to Torch 4 about that. And now we see Torch has the idea of pawn to d5, and it's probably better anyway. But there was a while, maybe not anymore, but for a while, pawn to h4 moves like that, and then following with h5 and h6 were underestimated by computers. A little bit about my computer spiel. The days where humans are defeating computers or top computers are probably done, but cracking the idea of when to and when not to launch a pawn storm was for many years at the humans' advantage, with the humans having an advantage. Okay, a little bit off my soapbox here. So h5, h6, and then g6. My opponent doesn't. I'm assuming my opponent's a human because you're not allowed to use computer on the internet. Yeah. H6. My opponent doesn't want H7 takes. H6 takes H7. H6 takes G7, and then if the king captures, then the king has all this air near him. One idea would be to allow the capture on G7 and then sit, sit here on G8, using my pawn as a shield. Even that causes some reconfiguration of back rank pieces for black. But look, the majority of the game here says white has the center. White has a lead in development. White, with that, white has a lead in development. All these pieces here are still on the back rank. You could consider the rook developed or not, but the only piece developed off the back rank is on the 7th rank. On black, and the only piece that black has developed off the 8th rank is on the 7th rank. Classical pawn setup. This is white's board. It's an interesting board too. You might want to play this position with white to move against chess buddies and chess friends, because material's even. Each side has captured a bishop. The remaining material is same color bishop, and otherwise just offsetting and equal. But this would be an interesting position to play out there, where I dare say I have a strong advantage here as white, and no part of that advantage is due to a material advantage. It's not all that common. So, all right, off my soapbox. And if you want to play this position out, I play some great moves, and so maybe you want to, I don't know, go try the position and come back to the video. But we have knight c3, f takes e4, knight takes e4, keeping material balance. D5 is a little bit early, to open things up and push my knights around. But some of this is because, you can see D5 as a way of making sure that when the knight comes to C6, the knight isn't kicked around. It's not going to matter if your king's checkmated. Black needs to develop. I worked all this advantage. I think Torch has bishop d3. And bishop d3. It's scary to face that, to play bishop d3 and then face rook to e8. That's just a bit of a scary. Maybe then knight to e5, and the knight's so well outposted that the pin isn't all that scary. Bishop d3, bishop d3, but then just rook. Yeah, let's try this. Play this against computer. So Torch's move bishop d3, knight c6, which is what. Well, all of a sudden black is developed. The plan torch and the best move line has just sort of getting pieces off of their back rank, and all of a sudden we have a pretty darn even game because black's army is now developed. Even with the rook on a8, he's still connected to the rook on f8, so it's close to an even game. I mean, white's trump is h6, and maybe that the knight on g5 is quite strong, but other than that, I mean, look at this air, and air. White does not have the safest king, then again, neither does black, but alright, so that's an interesting, that's probably a better line. That refutes what happened in the game, and I played knight to e5, but somehow got away with it after castling queenside. I'm looking at this board and I'm thinking, what does White has all the wonders except material. This isn't actually how I thought of the board, but if White has all the wonders except material, what does he lack except material? I said structure. White needs structure. So knight takes c6, sort of a queen check if you want to believe like that, but the knight must be recaptured. And these are probably moderately bad double pawns. They're not horrible. It's not the end of the world, but they take a little bit of play against this file that used to be more vacant, as White's d5 pawn is covering c5, and even capturing that pawn leads to a piece reclaiming the situation that is still covering c5. So that's a thing. Then that just how they are. They're right here on the c file, clogging things up against black's best otherwise achieved checks and attacks. So, but not only that, just when some of these pieces trade off, just as the natural flow of the game, these are the type of pawns that don't immediately become strong. The back pawn might as well be, he's a target. So is the c6 pawn. Sometimes you can double pawns. You see if there's a bishop putting a pin on a queen, and white has a knight here, and then the bishop decides to capture. But for whatever reason, white will capture g2 to g3, and these types of pawns will support the center. They're similar, yeah. I don't know, maybe that's not. I'll look into this then. Anyway, we saw white play where rook e1 would have earned white the e file and a tempo of initiative. Instead, white played g4, and the torch thinks this is a bad mistake. It looks like there's one good move, and that's knight takes d4, and that all these other moves keep white either in a strong advantage or a huge advantage. Well, because you have to reclaim the material, that's why. So knight to d6 to be scared from g4. I eventually pick up on the idea of rook e1. White's position is more aggressive, more menacing, more forward, and also held together very loosely. We got this one, we got only royalty, I was going to say one, but only royalty protecting b2. Got a rook holding down a file that can become contested. We got the my queen is the only support against for the knight on g5. I just have too much. A lot of the pieces are protected once and only once. So you see here, this is a game-changing blunder. Rook, it's suggested that by rook e7. And white's attack becomes unstoppable by way of a slower build-up. But here, this knight at g5 is like me and like the knight. I'm gonna take him now! If we recall from Star Wars, the knight's just a touch too eager to see white's plans cash in. Knight takes h7. It works out anyway because of king takes h7, the most natural response, and how that falls to bishop takes g6, king takes g6, queen takes d4, and white has 4 points of material ahead. And not only that, Torch has found checkmate in 8 moves. Mate in 8. I don't normally calculate checkmate in 8, but it's there. Missed this mate in 1. The queen goes to g7, but I'm going to cause enough havoc with the promotion threat. And now my opponent resigns after rook takes e4. There's no strong attack against white's king yet, and then to capture this rook, black must lose his own, either to the pawn or after the check on the king, just outright to a direct following move. Not only that, but pawn is gonna promote. It's just they call this, I don't know, probably many ways to win. White has many ways to win. Alright, so that's all. That's all for that game. I tried wearing my hair on the opposite side, the opposite way today. I want to go back. Let's go back to some of these mistakes and misses. The main one would have been knight h7, and I want to play this position. I'm going to play this position following the software Torch Force recommendation. Rook to e7 and just show that I can win this game by way of an attack like so. Reasonably complicated position. Okay. All right, my friends. My New Jersey Devils start playing hockey soon. I'll be tuning in for the pregame coverage. So, thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Have a great night.